Hello, Algebra Prep students. Mrs. Kim here. Today we're going to talk about solving multi-step equations. We have done this. It's been quite some time now, so I'm going to go through a quick reminder of the steps for solving any equations, and then we're going to do some problems together as a reminder of what we need to do. First, if you're watching this, hopefully you are watching this from Canvas and then play pause it. Video on Canvas because you need to answer the questions as you go. If you are watching this straight from YouTube and are in my algebra prep class, then you should probably stop watching at this point and go find it on Canvas because Canvas is how you're going to turn it in, and it'll be live on Monday morning. So just wanted to give that caveat out there. So let's go ahead and start talking about multi-step equations, right? So I'm going to go ahead and label my paper multi-step. Just to remind us. Now, I'm not going to stop and give us a lot of time for writing. So if you're writing and you need more time to write some of these steps down, then just pause the video. You should be able to pause the video and then write until you get caught up to me and then hit play again, and you should be able to keep going in that method. Okay, so multi-step equations. So if you remember back from way back in February, I believe, we were talking about solving equations. Step one is always to check if both sides of the equal sign are simplified, right? So we're going to check both sides of the equal sign. To see if simplified. Right, so this could mean that we need to do some distribution, or we might need to do some collecting like terms on one side of the equal sign or the other side of the equal sign. We need to make sure that you cannot combine the terms together on the left side and then on the right side, right? Looking at those as two separate little simplification problems. So we always have to check that first. And then number two, here, we're going to check to see if the variables are on both sides of the equal sign, right? If there's variables on both sides, then we need to move the variable term across the equal side with that inverse operation, right? So we want to move those variable terms first. So the next thing we're going to check is we're going to check to see if variables are on both sides of the equal to sign, right? And then if yes, move one variable term across the equal sign by inverse operation. Right, so if it's positive, we're going to subtract. If it's negative, you're going to add. All right, so we need to get the variable terms together on one side of the equal to sign. Right, so we need to get the variable terms together. So step one is to check to make sure we're simplified. Step two is to make sure the variable terms are together on one side of the equal to sign. And then step three, once we have the variable term together, is to get the variable term alone, right? So step three is to get the variable term. So the whole thing, it probably has a coefficient of some sort, but our next step is to get the variable term alone. And we're going to do this by adding or subtracting the number, right? The constant. Right, so the variable term, since we put the variable terms together, if they were on opposite sides, now we're going to get the variable term alone by adding or subtracting that constant that's with the variable term on that same side. And then number four is to get the variable alone. So once we get the variable term alone, then we're going to get the variable alone. All right, so we're going to get the variable by itself. So variable alone. And we do that by multiplying or dividing the coefficient. that's attached to the variable. All right, so we're going to either if it's like 3x, we're going to divide by 3. If it's x divided by 3, we're going to multiply by 3, right? So we're going to get the variable term alone, and then we're going to get the variable alone. And then once we do that, we should have x equals something, which means our last step is to check, right? So we should always check your answer by substitution. I'm going to put substituting, I think. Substituting back to the original problem. All right, so those were the main steps, right? Check both sides of the equal sign if they're simplified. Check to see if the variables are on both sides of the equal sign. If they are, then we need to move one of the variable terms across that equal sign. Step 3 is to get the variable term alone by adding or subtracting the number, that's the constant, and then get the variable alone by multiplying or dividing the coefficient and then checking your answer. All right, so we're going to just do some of this practice. Hopefully this makes sense. So if any of this, if you're not done, pause it so you can keep writing and get all this written down. Okay, and then we are going to answer your first question on Play Pause It. So your first question on Play Pause It will come right now. All right, so hopefully you got that one right. Let's go now. I'm going to add a page. Let's do a couple problems together, right? So number 1, I have 4x plus 3 equals 2x minus 7. Right, so 4x plus 3 equals 2x minus 7. And so I'm going to write my steps over here. If you remember, writing the steps can be helpful. Make sure you're doing it right. So we should still be doing our steps in our notes here. So first thing we want to do is we look and say, okay, 4x plus 3 simplified. Then we say 2x minus 7 is also simplified. So step 1 is done. Step 2, we say, do we have variables on two sides? We say, yes, we do, which means either we're going to move the 4x or we're going to move the 2x. I think it's going to be easier to move the 2x. So I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides, right? But you can subtract 4x. You can do it either way. It doesn't matter. But so subtract 2x. So 2x plus 3 equals negative 7, right? There's step 1. And then now that we have 2x plus 3 equals negative 7, my next step is going to be to get rid of that 3. So it's a positive 3. So we're going to subtract 3 from both sides. So minus 3, minus 3. So I have 2x equals negative 10. And the last step is to get the x by itself. So to get the x by itself, we're going to divide by 2 both sides, which gives me x equals negative 5. Right, so there's my answer. X equals negative 5. Once we have an answer, then we should be substituting back into the original problem. So our original problem said 4x plus 3 equals 2x minus 7. So I'm going to take the 4x plus 3 and I'm going to substitute in that negative 5 first. So I have 4 times negative 5 plus 3, which is negative 20, plus 3, which is negative 17. So there's my check on the left-hand side. Then I'm going to take that negative 5 and I'm going to also now plug it into the right-hand side. So I have 2 times negative 5 minus 7, which is negative 10 minus 7, which negative 10 minus 7 is negative 17. These numbers should be the same. So this is my check, if you want to label it as such, right? I'm taking that negative 5 here and plugging it in for this x and plugging it in for this x and coming to becoming those two right there. All right. So we don't have any of that done. Pause it and finish that up. When you finish that up, then go ahead and answer your second question. All right, so let's go ahead on to number 2. Page 2, come on. I need another page. Oh, there we go. I know how to use this. All right, so problem number 2 here. So let's try this problem. So we have 6 plus 10n minus 4n, and that equals n plus 1. All All right, so I'm going to write my steps over here to the right. All right, so I draw my wall down my equal sign, keep me organized. And then I look here on the left, and I have 6 plus 10n minus 4n. So if I look here, what I see right now is I have these two are like terms. So that means my first step is going to be to CLT on the left, right? We're going to combine those terms. 10 minus 4 is 6n. Because they're on the same side, we don't do inverse, right? We just put those together. So we have 6 plus 6n on the left. Looking on the right, I had n plus 1. Those cannot go together. Those just comes down because they're already simplified. Now I have 6 plus 6n, that's simplified. N plus 1 is simplified. We have n's on both sides. If n's are on both sides, we need to move the n's. Either we can subtract 6n or we can subtract n. I'm going to subtract the 1n because I like to keep my numbers positive if possible. So I'm going to subtract 1n, right? That's n is the same as 1n. Sometimes it's helpful to write that 1 in front when you're doing that math, right? Because these n's are going to cancel out, leaves you with the number 1 on the right. And then 6 minus 1 is 5 here, so I have 5n, and then the 6 plus comes down. So I have 6 plus 5n equals 1. Now I have just an n on the left, so we get rid of that 6 out front. So to get rid of a positive 6, we are going to subtract the 6. So minus 6 from both sides. So 5n equals negative 5. And then now we have 5n equals negative 5. To get n by itself, we are going to divide both sides by 5. So divide by 5, divide by 5. I have n equals negative 1. There we go. There's my answer. Once you get your answer, then we got to check. So here, I'll go ahead and label my check this time. So I'm going to take the original problem, which is 6 plus 10n minus 4n equals n plus 1. And in place for the n, here, I'm going to put a negative 1 for those guys, and I'm going to put a negative 1 there. I'm not going to do any math, I'm just going to plug in. So I'm going to have 6 plus 10 times negative 1 minus 4 times negative 1. And I'm just going to do this left-hand side first, right? So this says we do the multiply before we do the add. So I have 6 plus negative 10, so negative 10 there, sorry. Minus 4 times negative 1, and then we do this multiply. So I have 6 plus negative 10 plus 4. Negative 4 times positive 4 is, or negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. And then we do 6 plus negative 10 is negative 4. And then negative 4 plus 4 equals 0, right? So there's my check. My check on the left-hand side yields a 0. Then I'm going to do my check on the right-hand side. So for this n plus 1, I'm going to put in the negative 1 plus 1. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. These two numbers should be the same. If these two numbers are the same, we did a good job. Yay! All right, go ahead and pause it if you're not done with any of that work. When you're done pausing it, you can play it and then answer the next question about this problem. All right, so let's go on to number 3. We're going to do a total of 5 problems together, so we got a couple more left. So number 3 here. Number 3 says 5 plus x equals negative 3 times x minus 7, right? Draw my wall down my problem. I look at this problem and I say, okay, 5 plus x is simplified. Then I look at the right-hand side and say negative 3 times x minus 7. We got to get rid of those parentheses, right? That is not simplified. So our first step is to distribute negative 3. We're going to multiply negative 3 times that x and get negative 3x. And we're going to multiply negative 3 times negative 7 and get a positive 21. You could also I'm going to do down here on the bottom, you can see where I have some space here. We could also do a 1 by 2 box if we like to use that multiplication table, the box, right? This is negative 3x, and then negative 3 times negative 7 is positive 21. Same thing, it's at the top here, either way. But if it helps you to do the box, draw the box off on the side. It'll help you do that. 5 plus x needs to come down because it didn't have to have any math to be done. Right, so now we're at this point. I look at it, it's okay, negative 3x plus 21 is simplified. So our next step is to see, are there variables on both sides? This problem does have variables on both sides. We have an x on the left and we have a negative 3x on the right. So that means either we're going to subtract 1x or we're going to add 3x. I prefer to add over subtracting. So I'm going to add 3x to both sides at this point. You could pick either variable term to move, but you should move a variable term before you move the numbers. So 5 plus 4x equals 21. Right, now the variable x is on the left. We need to get rid of that 5 that's attached to it, so it's a positive 5. The opposite of positive is a negative, so we're going to subtract the 5 from both sides. Minus 5, minus 5. So 4x comes down equals 16. 21 minus 5 is 16. And now I have 4x. We need to get x by itself. So to get x by itself, we're going to divide by 4, both sides. Right? So then I have x equals 4. There's my answer. All right, once we get x equals 4, we have an answer, then we're going to check our answer. So the check for this problem says we're going to take 5 plus x equals negative 3 times x minus 7. It's helpful to write that problem down, right? That's where we're going to be doing our check. We're going to take the x is 4, and we're going to plug in for this x, and then we're going to do the same thing and plug in for this x on the other side. So I have 5 plus 4, which is 9, right? There's my 1. Check done. On the right-hand side, I have negative 3 times 4 minus 7. Order of operations says we do parentheses first. So I have negative 3 minus, parentheses, times negative 3, because 4 minus 7 is negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is a positive 9. These are the same. Yay! We got our math done correctly. All right, 9 and 9. That's what our check yielded. So x equals 4 is the answer. And then the check tells us if the check is a true statement, that means our answer is correct. Go ahead and pause if you're not quite done and finish up. And then answer the question being asked. All right, so we got 2 more left. So number 4, let's do number 4 next. Number 4. So we have 12x plus 4 equals 6x plus 2 times x minus 4. Looks like a dot. Let's make it look like a minus sign. Right? So if I look at this problem, draw my wall. 12x plus 4. 12x plus 4 is cannot be combined. So we're going to leave that alone. On the right-hand side, I have a 6x, and then I have 2 times x minus 4. I see some parentheses. We always got to get rid of those parentheses first. So we're going to start by distribute 2. Right? We're going to distribute the 2 here, so that's 2x. We're going to distribute the 2 there, that's minus 8. The 6x has to come down, and since that's a positive 2x, we're going to make that a plus sign, right? So that's where we're at right now. The 12x plus 4 just comes down, it can't be simplified. Now I look at this on the left, I have 6x plus 2x minus 8. It is still not simplified, right? We can take these guys here, those are like terms. So my next step is to CLT on the right. Right, we need to collect those like terms. 6 plus 2 is 8, so this is 8x minus 8 equals 12x plus 4. Now, on the left-hand side, we are simplified. On the right-hand side, we're simplified. So we have variables on both sides. Now, either we move the 12x or we move the 8x. I think I'm going to move the 8x, so we're going to subtract 8x from both sides. So, because easier to keep those numbers positive. So 12 minus 8 is 4. So 4x plus 4 is on the left. Negative 8 is on the right. Now we're going to get rid of that 4. We're going to subtract the 4 from both sides. So minus 4, minus 4. 4x equals negative 12. Negative 8 minus 4 is negative 12. And then let's get x by itself, and let's divide by 4. Both sides, which gives me x equals negative 3. There's our answer, x equals negative 3, right? So we distributed 2, we collect like terms on the right, then we subtracted 8x, we subtracted 4, and then we divided by 4. Once we did all that work, then we got to do our check. We're going to check, so we have 12x plus 4 on the right, and we have 6x plus 2 times x minus 4, 12x plus 4 on the left, apologize, 6x plus 2 times x minus 4 on the right. So starting with putting this guy in for here first, I have 12 times negative 3 plus 4. Order of op says we do this first, so negative 36 plus 4, which is negative 32. So on the left-hand side, I have negative 32. Then we got to take that negative 3 and we got to plug it in on the right, which means it has to go into two places on the right, right? There's an x here and there's an x there. So let's go ahead and write that out. So I have 6 times negative 3 plus 2 times parentheses, negative 3, whoops, there we go, minus 4. Order of operations says we do parentheses first, right? So we're going to do this first. So this can just be written down. We're not going to do that multiplication yet. 2 times negative 7. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. And then order of op says we do this multiply first. So I have negative 18 plus 2 times negative 7, which is negative 18 plus negative 14, because negative 7 times 2 is negative 14. So negative 18 plus negative 14 is in fact, negative 32, right? 18 plus 14 is 32, and it's a negative plus negative. So that means that these are the same. Yay! All right, finish that problem up. And then go ahead and answer the next question. All right, one last problem. Number 5. So number 5, we have 4x plus 6 equals, whoops, that doesn't look equals, 2 times 10x minus 1, right? So here we go. Let's write our steps, right? So 4x plus 6 is simplified, so we leave that alone. 2 times 10x minus 1 means that first thing we need to do is distribute the 2, right? We're going to multiply that. 2 times 10x is 20x, and then we're going to multiply 2 times negative 1 is minus 2. So here we go. We have 4x plus 6 equals 20x minus 2. Still got variables on two sides, so we got to move either the 4x or we got to move the 20. I think it's going to be easier to move the 4x, so I'm going to subtract 4x from both sides. Right, minus 4x means 6 equals 16x minus 2. Right, now 6 is simplified on the left, 16x minus 2 simplified on the right. Now we need to get rid of that minus 2 to get the x term by itself, so we're going to add 2 to both sides. Plus 2 and plus 2. 6 plus 2 is 8. So 8 equals 16x. It's okay if the x is on the right or left, does not matter. Just leave it there on the right. Last step is to get the x by itself, so we're going to divide by 16 on both sides, right? We got to divide by the 16 because we need to get 16 divided by 16 to be 1 and give us x, right? On this side over here, right, that can stay a fraction. It can be simplified, right? So if I divide out, I can divide an 8 out of the top and the bottom. If I divide out an 8 in the top and the bottom, then I end up with 1/2 equals x. Be super careful you don't try to make that a 2, right? Our answer can be fractions. That is totally all right to have a fractional answer. So we have x equals 1/2. And then our last step here is to check. So let's go ahead and check. We're going to take 4x plus 6, and we're equals 2 times 10x minus 1. So we're going to take this 1/2, and we're going to plug in for this x first. So I'm going to do, since I'm going to be multiplying 4 times a fraction, I'm going to make the 4 a fraction, right? 4 over 1/2, 4 over 1 times 1 over 2, right? That's what this means, plus 6. We do this multiplication first, so 4 times 1 across the top, 2 times 1 across the bottom. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 plus 6 is 8. Right, so this left-hand side simplifies to 8. The right-hand side, we're going to take, again, this x, and we're going to plug it in for that x right there. So I have 2 times, I'm going to, again, make this 10 a fraction, since we know we're multiplying it times 1/2. Right, so we're going to multiply across the top. So 10 times 1 is 10, 2 times 1 is 2. Simplify that, 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then we keep going with the order of op in the parentheses. 5 minus 1 is 4. Right? And then 2 times 4 is 8. We ended up in the same place. Even though it was a fraction, we got there. Yay. All right, so go ahead and finish that problem up. And then there's one last question to answer for your notes. And then you'll get to practice this week on your homework and when I see you in class on Wednesday.